Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
My name is Chris Murphy, and our first agenda item is the Pledge of Allegiance. So, everyone, please rise and direct your attention to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is public comments, and I don't know that I see anyone present for that.
Oh, hold on. I have two people there in the waiting room.
Oh, do you? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to presume that Jeffrey L. is our Jeff.
Okay. Join audio.
Very good. So for those of you who just were entered in through the waiting room, we're on our second agenda item, which is public comment. So if anyone has any public comment to make, please signify by using the raise your hand icon on the meeting, or otherwise maybe just turning on your camera and physically waving to the camera. So it looks like we have Liz Duffy raising her hand. So Liz, did I read that correctly? Are you raising your hand for public comment?
I am, yes.
Very good. If you would just introduce yourself and let us know what town you live in, please.
Sure. I'm Liz Duffy. I am in Shaftesbury. I just wanted to find out what the board is doing about bringing back the mask policy. Shaftesbury just sent an email today saying there's basically unchecked COVID in the school. So is the board going to bring back the mask policy? From what I heard, when the mask policy was taken away, that it was being left open for reassessment. Bennington County is red right now as far as transmission. Thank you.
All right. So this is for your benefit, Liz, and as well as for anyone else's benefit. The policies within the SVSU sort of prohibit the board from answering direct questions that are raised in public comments. However, that doesn't mean the board isn't necessarily taking it under advisement or will not be. So I'm unable to directly answer your question, but certainly thank you for bringing it to our attention tonight. Could you maybe answer a question for me though? You said the parents received the email today talking about unchecked COVID in the school.
Yes,
Who authored that email?
There's a high number of cases of COVID within Shaftesbury right now.
Okay.
Do
you know who authored the email or who distributed it?
Came through K-12 Alert.
Okay.
Or Infinite Campus, sorry, I think from Amy Brown.
Okay, thank you.
And Chris, I'll just double check because my daughter came home today and I think they had 13 kids out of one class and they had 4 out of her class. So half of the 6th graders were not in school today. You know, there could be other reasons, but it sounds like a bunch of COVID, you know. And so, I mean, like as a parent, that's what I'm hearing from my own student, my kid. And the other kids are going out and they're talking about who has COVID, who doesn't. So
I guess I would say that although at this point there is not a school-wide masking policy in place or practice or directive, students and families are always at their own discretion. If you want to wear masks, absolutely. And I understand that that does not have the same effect or necessarily bring us to the same outcomes as if there was a mask mandate. But I do just put that out there as a measure of individual precaution that can be taken.
yeah, we can always talk about it in the chair's report too, Chris. So, you know, we can have, because we left it open before, which is if we see a resurgence that we'd bring it back to the table.
Yep.
Now, I think as a parent and a healthcare provider, I'm seeing both right now. So I think we should bring it back maybe to the chair's report and at least discuss it and come up with whether a strong recommendation, but we can have that discussion later.
Yep. And I think that makes total sense, Jeff. I also see Angela Milligan. I don't know if you're here for public comments. If you are, you can wave.
Yes,
floor, please.
I too am a Shaftesbury parent and am concerned with the no masks. I have a child that's ineligible to be vaccinated, and a kindergartner, and both of my kids like share a bedroom. So I too am concerned with the level of.
Thank you. Thank you both for preparing tonight. All right. It looks like that exhausts our folks for public comments. So let us move down to agenda item 3, which is the consent agenda. So the consent agenda is comprised of the minutes from our last meeting, which Richard has already circulated. We have 2 resignations: Kristen Thompson from Molly Stark and Anthony Johnson from Shaftesbury. We have a nomination for Alina Cochran coming into Shaftesbury. And finally, we have a request for a Vermont State Capitol building field trip through Shaftesbury. So first of all, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as published, please. So moved. Thank you, Dick.
Second.
I saw Tammy with her hand up first, so we'll call it Dick and Tammy. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
I just have one concern as a parent, or as a school board member too. I start seeing teachers like Elaine Cochran, who's a great special educator. I know there's some other special educators that are moving to teaching positions. These are highly skilled, highly trained. Elaine's with the district since 2013. She has a lot of information ahead of hers, and she's going to a great position. To support her moving here, but to replace that as a special educator with a new person out of school, really some valuable assets. Whether in the elementary schools or the high school or the middle school, of these teachers taking other positions. So I'm just concerned about special ed as a whole, because there's a lot of openings if you look at the website. So, as a board member, these people take care of most valuable students, or the students with the most needs. And if they're taking teaching positions or other positions, we have to kind of look at, why are they moving? Especially Elaine, who's been in the same position for 10 years now. And she's a great special educator. So now I'm just concerned about, what's going forward, what's going to look like for the, special ed population in our district.
So maybe at some point this evening, we can ask Nick Galt, our director of HR, to just speak about recruitment efforts and hiring practices, specifically for our open special ed positions.
Yep.
Sandy, I saw you there.
The principal reports in the minutes on line 4 on page 3. I believe it should say that Principal Johnson and Mrs. Chansey were talking about the management of Woodford School, and probably not Molly Stark.
Okay. Yep. I think that is probably the correction to be made. Okay. Richard, I imagine you were able to take note of that. So if not, please let me know at a later date. I can communicate that correction to you. Any other proposed corrections or amendments to the minutes? Any other questions about, or any other conversation rather, about the consent agenda? Yeah, please, Sandy.
Just one question. The field trip is the 6th graders from Shaftesbury who are hoping to go, and if they have such a high rate of COVID, what is the procedure? At what point do they decide they're not going?
I think ultimately that's going to be up to Principal Johnson to make that call.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if there is no more discussion on the consent agenda, there's a motion on the floor to approve it. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Shayla, if you are able to just maybe use the raise your hand icon to vote one way or the other, please, or just raise your hand in real life. So all those in favor, signify by raising your hand. We've done that. All those opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Any abstentions? Very good, and the motion passes. Oh, and Scott too. Thank you, Scott, for raising your hand.
Was I not on video? I was on video.
I see you now. I wasn't seeing you before, but I see you now. Thank you. All right, so the motion passes. Great. So that brings us to agenda item 4, finance. The treasurer's report will be posted. I don't think it was posted as of this morning when I last looked. And then we have 2 items that require our action. So I will turn to Director Gordon. Director Gordon, can you please take us through the design contract for the HVAC materials as well as the truck purchase, please?
Sure. So if you recall, a few months ago, we had a presentation to the board about our ARP Esser, the American Rescue Plan Esser funding that we were planning and how we were going to allocate that. A big portion of it is going to be dedicated to our facilities. And through that, we lumped together a series of upgrades for all 6 of the elementary schools, and we labeled them each VAC optimization. So what we did was we had to submit these individual projects for buildings to the Agency of Education for concept approval. The projects entail, and it varies from building to building because they're all kind of at different states of their mechanical status. But the design work will look at each one and either install or expand mechanical ventilation. We're also going to be looking at the filtering of the system and possible disinfectant in the system. So there's definitely some options out there that we can look to have our engineers explore as they're going through this design process. We'll also be looking at air quality monitoring as part of these projects. The systems, if they don't already have some building management systems that are going to make the mechanical systems much easier to operate through computerized systems, and you can see and monitor where there might be problems. So those would be installed. We'll, of course, have everything tested and balanced, and then hopefully installing air conditioning in the buildings as well. So all of that for each of the buildings was submitted to the agency. We did receive concept approval for all of those projects. So once we had that, our project manager took that and put it out to bid for design services. So you'll see in the document that was submitted to the board, it actually does include Mount Anthony. So this will be the same information that's actually going to that board next week as well. But we figured with everybody throughout the state and probably throughout the country looking to do this type of work to improve their schools, we would probably get a better response if we kind of lumped everything together. So because you own the 6 elementary schools, you will have to contract directly with the design firm, but the project will be funded through federal money. And the same thing with Mount Anthony. When we bring it to them, they'll be contracting for their buildings. And again, will be funded through the federal money. So our project manager put together the summary of what the responses were for these design services. It was sent out to 9 firms. We had 3 that responded, and their recommendation is to go with Du Bois and King. And we do have experience with them, and they actually did some work for Mount Anthony not too long ago when COVID first entered our world.
Okay, so for those of you who didn't get a chance to see the Centerline Architects proposal summary, it looks like the total cost from D&K, Du Bois and King, is a little over $240,000, which is certainly most competitive, but also we have this experience that Director Gordon was just speaking about. Any questions?
Actually, Chris,
Yes.
could the 240 is actually for the Mount Anthony campuses. It's actually 152.3 for the
Okay, very good. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So any questions so far for Director Gordon? Okay. In that case, I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation to award this bid to Du Bois and King. So thank you, Dick.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much, Susan. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion one way or the other? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Thank you, Scott, for raising your hand icon. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good. So that motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you also please take us through the truck purchase request? Jerry's here. So I don't
Yeah, we did. We've been through this process a couple of times, and we were almost at a point where we had a truck and things fell through. And I think, as probably all of us are experiencing, we have some significant supply chain issues. So we're thinking the only way that we're actually going to be able to get a truck is if we can go to a dealership and kind of see what they have on the lot at any given day. Mm-hmm. And I think Jerry and I just wanted to be sure that the board was going to be okay with us kind of approaching it that way, because having a bid process and, having it extend over, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, things change drastically. Mm-hmm. and dealerships just can't commit. because they don't know what's going to be coming off the boat when things come overseas, or, you know, even what's coming off the manufacturing lines here in the States. So I've reached out to the agency to make sure that we're still working, you know, in alignment with what the intent of statute is. I mean, we've been through the process, we've opened it up twice, but my thought is if we've already identified a couple of sources of funds that would allow us to likely purchase outright with breakage from this year's budget. So if the board was so kind to allow him to go out and kind of shop, we might be able to just actually make the purchase outright based on what is available on the lots. And we would, if he was able to find something, we would check with a couple of other dealerships too, just to see if there's anything comparable, and kind of approach the process that way instead of the standard, you know, several week process and landing us where we have been with no results.
And so, Director Gordon, the money has already been allocated. It's in the budget already for this truck. So is anything really required of us other than just to give Jerry the go ahead to take this route as opposed to the bidding route?
So what we actually budgeted this year was for lease payments. So we were actually looking to extend the cost over the next 4 years, and we have that budgeted in FY23 as well. There are some pockets of money just because of we've continued to budget. You know, when we're budgeting in the fall and winter for the following school year, we're thinking COVID's finally going to be over. We're going to go back to normal, and all the programs are going to run, and we're going to spend all the money. It hasn't happened. So we do have some excess funds, and you guys probably remember when we were looking at budgeting this fall, we had a pretty significant fund balance. So we're kind of looking at that similar situation this year, but also looking at ways to kind of spend that down. So this would be a potential way to reduce that fund balance as we're going into budgeting for FY24.
Okay. So I suppose before we open it up for discussion, I would entertain a motion to give approval to Jerry Prue to go shopping for his truck. Finally.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, so we'll call it a first and a second. Now, any discussion about this? Any further discussion? Yes.
Please.
Hey, just a moment, please, Jeff. Go ahead, Dick.
It's like the swallows returning from Capistrano. Every year we hear Jerry come to us. I'm really tired of listening.
I hope not seeing me just a bit.
I think he deserves the shot.
Thank you. It's only been 5.
Okay, Jeff, please.
Quick question, Renee, if Jerry finds something, can you just check with Chris and get their approval then and there? Would that be okay from a, board standpoint? If he walks onto some lot for tomorrow and there's a truck there that's in the budget, that's the right price, can you just check with the chair or vice chair and we just say, we're going to blanket, we'll buy the truck then and there?
Sure.
Is that?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. And of course, I mean, once we get into the actual purchasing of it, I mean, you'll eventually see it in a warrant anyway. But I think, Jerry, I mean, you can speak to this better than I, but knowing the equipment that you're looking for and how the market has been kind of causing everything to kind of explode with it becoming more expensive, I think you're looking in the neighborhood of like $80,000 to $100,000, right?
Yes, that's from what they originally went up to when we budgeted, figuring it was going to be 62,000. Right now, just a truck with a bed, that's not counting a plow or a sander for it, it's about 67,000 if you can find one. And I won't say where it is, but I know where there is. There's one. I've had people out and somebody called me and said, hey, there's one, but I didn't call the guy until yesterday. And I said, is that still sitting on your lot? And he says, yeah. And I said, well, I have a school board meeting and it depends on what happens there. Maybe I'll call you on Wednesday.
All right.
So there is one, at least there was yesterday.
Okay, great. Good luck.
Thank you. And thank you very much, everybody, for the support. It's always, you always have been supported, but it's always nice to come here and feel it again.
Well, the meeting's not over yet, Jerry. So
Sure.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Director Gordon, anything else we need to take under advisement in finance?
Nope, we just wanted to be sure that we were, being open and transparent, that we wanted to do this and then, of course, get the board's approval before we started the process. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so agenda item 5, as always, are policies, but there are none under our consideration tonight. So that moves on to agenda item 6. Assistant Superintendent Boudreau, are you aware, do we have a principal's report?
Not this.
Okay.
I was told not this.
Okay. All right. Very good. So that moves on to the superintendent's report, or in this case, the assistant superintendent's report. So
Great.
the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm here with Melissa Senecal and Renee Gordon. Dr. Kate Abbott is usually, there she is again, with us as well. The presentation that we're sharing this month with all the boards, it's grant season. And this is the time of year where our team is, we're preparing state and federal and local, actually, grants that support our schools district. And so tonight's presentation is going to be around that. And then we're going to entertain questions. And this is also where we get feedback, but we want to be transparent about the work that we're doing. So I'm going to share my screen. I always have to talk when I do that. I should do it quickly. Yes. Okay. Go. Ooh, that's half the battle. Okay. So we want to start by just letting you know, we get lots of questions about who's on the grant team. We're actually quite a large team at this point. We meet every Monday at 11:30. Sometimes it's for a short bit and sometimes it's for much longer depending on the needs. Right now we're meeting frequently and they're lengthy meetings. So again, it's made up of myself as assistant superintendent, Dr. Kate Abbott, interim director of student support services, Melissa Senecal, director of curriculum instruction and assessment, Lisa Poplotsky, administrative assistant to the assistant superintendent and curriculum, Abby Ferrara, administrative assistant for recovery, Sheila Prince, administrative assistant to student support services, Renee Gordon, director of finance and operations, and Mary Buack, the accounting manager. So again, we have quite a team. And so we're going to take you through the first, the way we're going to run this, we're going to go through we're giving you the big 3 grants. We're going to give you an overview. And then at the end, we'll summarize some of the smaller grants, and then we'll let you ask any questions that you might have. And so, give me just a moment. So the Consolidated Federal Programs, commonly referred to Title, is what we're preparing right now. And there are 3 titles within our program. We have Title I, which provides financial assistance to meet the needs of educationally at-risk students beyond, so it's the and more. All of the schools in the SVUESD are school-wide schools. That means they meet the threshold to receive support based on low income status. Title II funds we use for professional learning. So that's what that pocket is from. And Melissa Senecal in a moment will share some examples. And then Title IV, which is a newer title, but I would say we've had it for quite some years right now, it's kind of this nice bucket where it's all around well-rounded education, improving schools' conditions for safe and healthy schools, and promoting the effective use of technology. And so we want to give you a sense. So this is for not the grant we're preparing, but for this past year. This gives you a sense as a district it comes in a district amount of money. So you can see our allotment. And Melissa, do you want to jump in and just highlight some of the things we use our title monies for?
Absolutely. So for Title I, you can see the current year award and the rollover. Some of the ways that we use those are our school and our district level interventionists. So those are our personnel that work within the school to supplement the good Tier 1 first instruction that our students are getting. Also, tutoring services, a shout out to wonderful tutoring that we get throughout the district, including from Bennington Tutorial Services, parent engagement activities. Thank you for all of the parents that show up. You brighten the day for those parent engagement activities. A lot of work goes into that, but it's always a payoff when people are there. We also fund homelessness, and I want to thank Laura Boudreau for taking that on this year. And early education are just some of the ways that we fund through Title I. Title II is a lot about ongoing, so not just a one and done, but ongoing professional learning. And I really appreciate the district and also our building level reading and math coaches that do a lot of that with our wonderful teachers. We also have some data literacy professional learning and supervision and evaluation. For Title IV, we have our district equity coordinators. We have the director of equity and school climate, building level. We have a coach for social emotional at the district level and behavior that works with the entire pre-K through 12. We have art and music personalization, and again, parent engagement activities, working on parent engagement. And we have contracted services for trauma-related counseling services, which we had prior to COVID, and we have definitely needed throughout this time also. Those are just some examples of how the funds are being used.
Melissa. And something specific that I'll share with you. One of our Title IV investments that's really specific to the SVUESD is through the art teachers. So we do consultation. So we ask them how they would like to use the money. And it needs to link back to the work that they're doing. So our art teachers have an investment around building relationships with families through providing art events. So Emily Umflitt, who works both at Woodford and Shaftesbury, offered she really latched on to the virtual world and found a really creative way. She created a tutorial around how to do an art project. Kids got backpacks at their houses. And then she had a training video that families could participate in. And then part of the activity was to bring the families sent back their puzzle pieces, and now they can hang up. And then at Bennell, they decided on Friday night, it was from 5 to 7 on Friday night on the campus of Bennell. The Vermont Arts Exchange art bus was there. There was a hula hoop extraordinaire person. There was hula hoops all over the place. And then the art teacher had arranged, it's a community weaving project. And so families could come up and add things to the loom. I hope I'm using the correct terms. And then the other specialist teachers were there to support. So those are just two examples. And that's an example of a Title IV investment. What I'm going to just share with you now is we also keep track, and this is what I do with Renee. We keep track of what's remaining. So the process, and we're giving you a picture of what's remaining for this year. So what happens is the money, it runs from July 1 to June 30th. We receive an initial district allotment. And once that's received, and that's what we're doing right now, we write investments against that. And then after that, we also are required to do equitable shares through Title I. So Renee, myself, Kate meet with all the independent or private schools in our attendance zone. So the money follows our kids. So the money follows our SVSU kids. So we have to do, the state gives us a list and we do consultation with those schools. And I know what Renee is doing right now for next year is she's figuring out what each school receives based on their low income status. So we consult with them. We also have a feedback form on our website, a title feedback form, which the community can access. And we hold Title I meetings every year where we collect feedback about ideas, which we've listed there. And again, this all goes together. There is money typically that's left over at the remaining of the year. The last 2 years, there's been money, and specifically in Title II and IV, some of which because of COVID, we couldn't run certain events. And the state's been great about letting us roll that money over. We also try to leave, and we're allowed to roll over money because, as we know, salaries increase every year, and we want to make sure that we have money in there to support. So that's a basic overview of title grants. And again, we do make sure that they're linked to our district and our school level continuous improvement plans. There are district-wide investments, and then there are school-specific investments. And I think I've covered everything else there. And then I think the big thing, we were going to take this opportunity this year to have you, to try to share with you, we don't get just a big pocket of money. We get a pocket of money, and we have to write one investment at a time. So I think this past year we had about 100, right, Renee? About 100 investments. And each investment is approved by, each investment has to be approved by the state. so that we can use the money. We can go back in and make changes, but then it goes through all these, it goes through two different departments at the state level. So Dr. Kate Abbott can't be with us tonight, but another big grant that's also for grant season is the IDEAB grant, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and it includes IDA Basic and IDA Pre-K. The purpose again is to assist local education agencies in providing special education and related services to students. And the, just wanted to hit on my little box in the way here. So a portion of the funds also goes towards eligible IEP eligible learners whose parents have enrolled them in a private or non-public schools. So in Title Land, it's called equitable shares. And in IDA land, it's called proportional share allowance. So same idea of we have to collaborate with our independent and private partners, but it looks a little bit different. And what you can see here, and you know what, Melissa, I'm going to let you hit on some of the areas that Kate works with her team to designate money.
Sure. I think with IDEAB, Dr. Abbott has changed it to be student services and works a lot with professional learning to make sure that there's coaching going on, to make sure that there are literacy interventions, evaluation strategies, and supports for struggling learners in the general ed settings. She also does a lot with bringing in assisted technology, and a big part of her budget would be including transportation, to make sure that the transportation, physical therapy is also included in student and speech services in accordance with individual educational plans, are just some of the examples of how IDEAB is used.
Yep. And then we're again showing you the amount remaining in the system based on what the needs were this year. And IDEAB works very similar to Title in that it runs July 1 to June 30th. There's an initial district allocation. We collaborate with the independent schools and we create the investments. But the bulk of the allocation for the IDA grants is identified based on student-specific IEP needs. Our final big grant, which we've talked about this year, so we're just going to kind of give you some updates, is the Esser Grants. And as a reminder, they're linked to the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. There are three different types. We have Esser 1, that is expires on September 30th, 2022. We have Esser 2, which expires on September 2023. And then we have ARP Esser, which expires on September 2024. And so, Melissa, I will turn it over to you to highlight some key areas.
Sure, you can see that in Esser 1, a lot of things that we were doing were pandemic-related procedures and materials. We really needed those air purifiers and filters, contact tracing and vaccine monitoring. But we also made sure that there was summer and extended day after school services and curriculum work and materials that were needed during that time. Now, as we transition into Esser 2, we added more of boosting up our educational technology and seeing what worked really well and funding that, along with, of course, making sure that we had the summer and extended day services, maintaining those operations, web conferencing and staffing as we're using now in a brand new world, personal protective equipment, contracted services for contact tracing, and we wanted to make sure that there was professional learning for staff. With Esser 3, we're really focusing a lot, 20% at least has to be set aside for learning loss, because we're making sure that we're doing needs-based, looking at where we're putting our monies. And this will also go towards educational technology and software. Renee's also talked about that HVAC system optimization for our schools, making sure that's safe and healthy for our students. We're also seeing that not just for our students, but for our staff, mental health services are really important to address during this time, along with the learning loss. And those are just some of the examples of the work that we're doing with Esser 3. And I know that Laura's going to touch upon it, but if you're interested in how some of the money is being spent already, I would please say, go to our website, and there is a button that says Esser. If you click on that, and you click on the implementation report, in blue in the text, listing all of the things that we've spent the money on so far. And that is constantly updated. And I know that that's also talked about a little bit below.
So the difference with this grant is where you heard the title grant and the IDEAB runs the fiscal year. Esser is just very different. It's like this rolling pocket of money that we write grants for. And then like Renee and I right now are preparing for an amendment for one of the grants. So it's fluid in a different way than we're accustomed to. But again, most of the investments that we've prepared, other than the construction investments, came from the recovery team that met last spring and had community engagement. And we had to submit, that's a big piece of Esser, is the meaningful consultation that we need to do with our school and our families and our community. So that's a big piece. And so again, and then updates are placed on our website. The other document that's on our website that's really important is the ARP Esser LEA plan, which is a requirement of the state. And so there's also a link to that as well. And then we've also shared with you that with Esser, we have to stay within the boundaries of the 14 items. So when we're thinking about an investment, we are that team that you saw that comes together once a week. We're always thinking about how they meet the criteria. Because when Renee and I meet with the state, those are the questions that they're asking us to revisit. And then the last thing we wanted to do with you is just highlight that we do have some other grants that are a bit different. Uh-oh, I'm stuck. Hold on. Okay, here we go. So the Medicaid, or we call it the MAC grant, we receive annually. We use this money in partnership with the Department of Health. That's how we fund our tooth tutors. That's our stipends for our lead nurse, our lead clinician, our lead counselor. We also, the nurses, that's their membership to the SNAP medical records piece. We did receive an ARP homeless 2 money. We have, as we've shared in the past, we've seen a huge uptick in homelessness. And so transportation, we're required to transport children, especially back to their school of origin. And so we've been able to use this money. It also helps to support resources to be successful in school. There's an ARP IDEA basic and pre-K piece in there that's is meant to focus directly on instruction and intervention. We have alcohol and drug abuse prevention coordinator, Glauca Kushman, who's housed at the middle school. She's amazing. She runs a student leadership team. It's incredibly positive. And then the Mellon grant was a partnership with Bennington College, where we were considered one of the 3 partners, and we received $20,000 a year for 3 years. So again, we wanted to just give you an overview of and give you an update where we are with the grant system, and to also let you know who the team members are that are on the team. And now, if there's any questions for us.
Where are we in terms of spending the ESSER 1 funds that expire in September?
That's the amendment we're writing.
Okay.
Yeah, we're really looking to make sure that we're going to spend that down as much as we possibly can. So we're kind of shuffling things a little bit because we have some rollover between ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. So things that have already been approved in both. But if we're finding that we're going to have summer services, we're going to pile that into ESSER 1 to make sure we're spending that down before it expires.
Thanks. So what other questions do we have?
Jeff's got his hand.
Yeah, Jeff, please.
And this is something, maybe we can talk about later, Laura. I know I've asked Jim the question before, how are our kids doing? I know SBAC scores released in the fall, but they weren't at the district and state, or at the district and school level. Have those been released yet? Do we know of?
That part, Melissa, go ahead. Do you want to share?
So I can share with you that we're building right now the presentation, Mr. Lee, before that, because the state just released theirs.
Okay.
And so it's just been unembargoed. Prior to that, it was embargoed. So we're creating the presentation now, but we want to make it a complete presentation because we want to make sure that all of the assessment data is in there. It doesn't just include our SVAT scores, which are now unembargoed, but also all of our assessment data. And so we have to wait till the end of our assessment window for that. And so that would push us into June. Just
Okay. So I see something like that at some point.
Yeah, so we always, our intention was always, because we gave you the, we're reporting out right now on the 3 pillars of recovery. Social, emotional, mental health and well-being. We did the engagement and truancy. So our third presentation has always meant to be the academic achievement. We were waiting for the scores to release, and I think it was last Friday, right, Melissa?
It was last Friday. So we're now waiting for our Fast Bridge and our MAP data assessments to close, and they have not closed yet. We want to give our teachers time to wrap those up, and then we'll get those reports ready.
Okay. And then the part 2 of my question, I know American Public Media reported, on some reading issues in like 2020, and their NPR just reported on reading recovery and how the program is actually, it was federally funded, and, they found that, the kids made initial gains and actually fell behind later on. So, I mean, there's a huge chalkboard curriculum, whether it be in Florida or Texas, critical race theory, I really don't care about that. But, Lucy Calkins and Reading Recovery are 2 massive programs that have now gotten bad press in national media. Are we using programs like this? Or, could you give a presentation on what programs we're using? Because Florida did find some programs that were not good programs to use as well, besides critical race theory, but they found they did not meet standards.
So Jeff, your question is timely because that last pillar, academic achievement, that's what it's going to be. Okay. It's going to be, we want to, just like we did in the other presentations, we'll provide you with some data, and then we're going to provide you with exactly what we're doing to address that. So that's absolutely what that presentation is about.
Okay. Perfect. I appreciate it.
Yes, please, Andy.
Melissa, would it be possible to take and create something from the kids when they were in maybe 2nd grade to the same kids in 4th grade, maybe with the MAPS testing, where in 2020 in January, after those winter scores, and maybe the winter of 2022, but that same group of kids, so we can see exactly what is happening to our students?
So the snapshot we're going to provide is exactly what Vermont provided us. Vermont AOE was very specific in saying that they didn't want us to use longitudinal data during this time of COVID. At least that has been their recommendation. So I know there is value in following longitudinal data, and that's why we have the SVSU data dashboard, which at some point I would love to share with the boards because it's phenomenal. And it uses longitudinal data for both groups and individual students that our educators can use and do use. But right now, in a presentation wise, I would be going against what the AOE is telling me in order to use comparable data for during the time of COVID to anything prior to. At least that's the recommendation that we're getting right now.
And one more thing, since I have Melissa right here, I'll ask the question as well. There's some massive changes that are on the potential, and I use the word potential because it's still in legislative, on the MTSS and the RTI system that's supposed to go into effect, in January 2022. And the question is, there's the 3 outcomes are there going to be a full delay for everybody, they're going to push it through, or they're going to ask for waivers. As a district, are we ready to roll with this if we must, initiate it come July 1st, 2022? Are we ready to go with this? Are we ready to go with this program if it comes to everybody has to do it this year?
So I can tell you that why I think that we're in a better place, Mr. Leake, than most districts has to do with the fact that we don't have a special ed department. we have student services, and that might just be a label, and yet it's not a label, because Dr. Abbott and I work together for all kids, whether they fall under that they have a special need or if they don't have a special need. And that transfer of not having silos happened a couple of years ago. And so I think that makes us be in a much better place. I think that I know that there is a lot of work with trying to make sure that we communicate to our staff members about the shift and change. And so that has started, and that will have to continue, because as you stated, it's a pretty big shift and change. And so I respect that you say that. And so we'll continue with our communication and our planning and bringing all of the people involved to the table to know what it's about, including the boards.
Okay. Just because I get caught wind of it on someplace else, but I haven't heard anything from the SVSU on how are we ready. Like I said, a lot of districts they're not ready, and some districts are saying, well, we're close to ready but not ready. So I'm just curious how prepared we are as a district. So it sounds like we're on the right track. So we wouldn't have to ask for a waiver if we didn't need to, potentially, or that's still up in the air.
I would defer to Mr. Culkeen for that.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions about our grants presentation? Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for that.
Thanks for your questions.
So that brings us to the next agenda item, which is the chair's report. We're going to break it out into a few quick things. First of all, I want to welcome Sandy Foster to the board. So Sandy comes to us as a representative from Pownell, but certainly it's your experience, successful experience as principal of Woodford for how many years? Remind us, please.
A few.
A handful of really good ones. So I think we're really fortunate to have that experience and your perspective here on the board. So thank you for being willing to do it and coming on with us. So thank you for that. Second one, Scott actually drew if anyone saw me checking my phone for a text, the vice chair drew my attention to the fact that we didn't actually vote on whether or not to allow Jerry to buy his truck. We talked about it and we all seem to think it's a good idea, but we should actually take it up for a vote. So although there was a motion on the floor, all those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, now it's official. Thank you. There it is. Thank you, Scott, for catching that. I would like to ask Director Galt, can you please speak to us briefly about efforts to recruit for our vacant special education positions? Understanding special education is, our special educators are employed by the supervisory union, not by this board, but they are certainly deployed in our schools. So could you just speak to us briefly about that, please?
Sure. So everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
So we are posted for a number of vacancies and have been virtually all year. We have had vacancies in numerous special education positions since the start of the school year. And so we have been posted and hiring throughout the year and will continue to do so for next year. I would say we're actually, and Dr. Abbott might be able to weigh into this a little bit as well. We're actually probably in a better position now than we were maybe towards the start of the year. We lost one or two people right at the beginning or just before the start of the year. We've been able to fill a few of those positions, but we do have a number of vacancies that are needed to be filled for next year, including, as Mr. Leake alluded to, some internal transfers that have occurred. So we will continue to post. We did budget, in addition to School Spring, which is the Vermont posting website, where every school district posts their positions. We did put money in the budget to begin posting on what's called OALS, O-A-L-S, which has historically been restricted to just New York school districts, but has been expanded to include New England school districts. So we'll be able to post there, which is huge because that is where most New York teachers go to look. And so now we'll be live with our postings there going forward. I think just to give my 2 cents on the special education teacher shortage, I'll say it's a larger issue certainly than the SVSU, so much so that the Agency of Education has granted waivers for special education licenses that are unique to to that endorsement because of they recognize the shortage of positions of people to fill the positions. So it is a larger trend, a statewide, national trend that we're seeing. But we're making every effort to fill those positions, and we'll continue to do so all spring and summer.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Just want to get a quick update on this building. So this board owns this building, which is going to be vacated pretty soon. And Scott has actually been the point person for running the ad hoc committee of figuring out how do we dispose of this building. So right now, the school's attorney, the district's attorney is still doing a title check. We're doing our due diligence to make sure that we can trace the title for this property. So before we take any steps. So Scott has a few different irons in the fire. He's been very diligent in chasing down possibilities for how we dispose of this property. I just want to give folks that little update. And lastly, we'll use the rest of the chair's reports to discuss COVID masking moving forward. So certainly not just for Shaftesbury, but for our other schools as well. My position has always been throughout this is that I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist and I'm not an immunologist or a virologist or a pathologist of any sort at all. And so I have always been very eager to take the advice of whatever scientists and doctors are advising us. So the Vermont Department of Health through the Vermont Department of Education. I don't know what their current stance is. I know, just about every day when you pick up the banner or when it gets delivered to your house, we're seeing frequent reports of more and more cases, different variants. I know there are pockets around our community in the catchment area for our district. I don't know if new guidance has been issued by either AOE or the Vermont Department of Health. Certainly there is a political element of that, which may be contributing to the silence that we're hearing. I can't say for certain, but I think generally folks would be pretty resistant to going back to having to wear masks, period. Not that that should change what this board recommends, but I just think it's a factor that's out there as well. So those are my thoughts off the top of my head. And I would certainly just open the floor for any board member who wants to share their thoughts on this.
I would, if parents feel like their child should wear a mask, then they should wear a mask. And I think we passed something that the other kids can't pick on them and all that stuff anyway. And if they feel more comfortable doing that, because some kids I know can't wear it, they have asthma and other stuff. But that's the way that I would feel. It would be up to the parent if they want their child to wear a mask.
Assistant Superintendent Boudreau, are there internal conversations that are happening?
We consistently follow the Department of Health and the Agency of Education guidelines. We're still constantly in check with Ashley Walker, our COVID-19 coordinator, who is still our COVID-19 coordinator this many years in. And at this point, that we're staying true to the path that we've followed. And I don't have any updates to provide.
Okay.
I will say we do ensure that there are resources available. Like I walked into 3 different buildings today and there's a container of masks and there's hand sanitizer available. And we make sure that those, similar to what you were suggesting, that those resources are available because we want to be responsive. And we are watching. And again, I would just want to reiterate, we are constantly in touch with I've actually walked on speed dial on my phone, so we're constantly in touch to make sure we're in tune, and she's always listening if something's coming. So yes.
So what I don't have a sense of, and maybe members of this board do, what are statewide trends looking like right now? Do we know in terms of rates of COVID transmission or what other schools are doing?
And I know there's red pockets throughout the state, but as a school, I think my wife teaches in Manchester. I mean, they're definitely seeing, I think BBA had 18 staff out, and they sent out an email yesterday trying to refigure how to deal with students in the school because so much staff was out. In her school, there are definitely kids who are out with COVID. Where a teacher had gone back to wearing masks who weren't wearing masks before. So, I mean, I know, I read the email from Mr. Johnson that went to this school, and it said, they're encouraging, masks if you live in immunocompromised individuals. But, my feeling is that most schools are dealing with the same situation. They're seeing huge influx of COVID. Just talking to people that my wife knows in her district, in schools in her district, they're seeing the same thing. I mean, we're not going to put a mask mandate back into place. I think what we can strongly word it, maybe, encouraging kids to wear more masks. Because I know my child was the only kid in her class wearing a mask, last week. And she still doesn't wear it all the time. She takes it off for gym, but she's consistently wearing her mask, and no other kids are. So I think that message of you should wear it for your own personal protection and others, it's gotten lost somewhere along the way. Look at the grocery stores. I mean, how many people walk in the grocery stores and how many people see masks? So, I think that message of it's the best for the community has disappeared. Even for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe, I don't know. That's my feeling.
I think, as Chris said, we kind of have to rely on the professionals to make the determination, and there kind of has to be at least a standard, a single standard that you can rely on. The Department of Education, the Agency of Education, excuse me, I think stays on top of this, and certainly Ashley does. I don't know that it does us any good to have one school mandated and one school not, or changing from day to day or month to month. I think a single standard is what we have to live with, and leave it to parental judgment after that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think at this point, we followed the agency, the Department of Health from the beginning. And then when we removed the mandate, which there was a lot of requests for, we did it with that same consideration that is what was being presented. That was their recommendation. So I think we just need to stay consistent in following, what the Department of Health in Vermont is indicating. And, if they're not feeling that there's a need to begin mandating masks in school again, I would feel, why would we know better, I guess, than they would?
I wonder if there's an opportunity to do all that has been said already, but also can we put out a statement that just says, all the way throughout this, we've encouraged people to do what makes them feel comfortable. A reminder message, much like what was in the note today at Shaftesbury, but a reminder message of, wearing masks is okay. Do what makes you feel comfortable. And maybe even a little bit of encourage it, depending on how we would word it. But is that an opportunity that we could look at? But we can't do it. I mean, it's not an army of one. It would have to be all three schools, at least in this area.
So, Scott, I'm not against that idea. I think what I'd like to do is at least get Ashley's input on that, since I don't know that there's anyone else within the supervisory union who has the body of knowledge that Ashley does. So I would be happy to follow up with her and just ask, to get her input on that as well. Okay.
That makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
So I will reach out to Ashley around that. Any other thoughts folks want to share? Okay. I mean, it continues to be a thing, when I sometimes catch myself saying, well, back before the pandemic was over, like that kind of thing. And it's not at all. And it's silly to think that we're even close to things being done and over with. And for those parents of very little kids, or for those kids who can't be vaccinated for one reason or another, I'm sure that anxiety has not subsided at all, regardless of how the rest of the state is doing. So just I'm just sorry that continues to be a larger thing in your life than it does in many other folks' life, for whatever that's worth, which probably isn't much. But thank you both for bringing this to the table anyway, and for making us aware of it. Thank you for that. So we'll use that to conclude the chair's report. We have an FYI as agenda item number 9, 2 bits, student enrollment and the budget status report, which are posted as always. And that brings us to our final agenda item of the evening, which is an executive session. We will very likely have to take some action afterwards. So for anyone watching at home, don't run away just yet if you don't want to miss the exciting conclusion to tonight's board meeting.
Can you invite?
Yes,
can I-
absolutely. So I would entertain a motion, please, to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313, subsection A1A. Thank you, Jerry. For discussion of contracts. And 1 VSA 313A3 to discuss the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee. Your motion still stand, Dick?
Yes.
Very good. We have a first, we have a second. Thank you very much, Susan. First and a second, any discussion about entering into executive session?
I just have to make a breakout room, so just give me a
Okay.
moment, please.
And we will be inviting Assistant Superintendent Boudreau and Director Galt into this executive session. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. And we'll say it again.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we shall enter into executive session. There we go, Cat TV. Okay, so I would entertain a motion, please, to exit executive session.
So moved.
Thank you, Dick. We have a second, please?
I'll second.
Thanks, Susan. Any discussion about exiting executive session? Hearing none, all those in favor of exiting executive session, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. So as we discussed in executive session, I would entertain, please, a motion to approve a 3% pay increase for non-union employees.
So moved.
Thank you, Dick. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second
Thank you, Susan. All right, any discussion about the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have exhausted our agenda, and I would entertain a motion to close and adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Dick. Can we have a second, please? Thank you, Dan. Any discussion on closing our meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.